just, I think this is really important to say because it's something that really irks me, are not just advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, yes, we do that. I think because of our lived experiences of people of color, we always think about things in a nuanced way. We're always cognizant of all of the I think the layers, right, of what it means to do any work in any industry being a person of color. And we think it's really important to highlight that that's important work. We do it inevitably, whether we want to or not. But we also are experts in so many other things, right? Like we're experts in architecture, right? Jordie's an architect by training. We're experts in policy, energy policy. We're expert in, actually thinking through climate solutions across the globe. We're experts in founding companies that sell sustainable products. We're experts in fashion and thinking about supply chain. So how do we make sure that we create I think a platform that acknowledges all of the layers of who we are?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sussy Soul podcast. My name is Latoya and I am here with two special women. I am here with Chante Harris and Jordie Vazquez, who are the co-founders of the Women of Color Collective in Sustainability, which is a collective to support women of color who want to connect, collaborate, identify mentorships, job opportunities, and seek resources within sustainability. I can't talk today. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, we're excited to be here. Also can't talk today, so if I say words that don't exist, just be kind.
No, don't worry. No worries at all. So, if you guys can just go ahead and introduce yourselves individually and a little bit about what you do and Wokesis.
That's good. Chante, you want to go first? I'm going to go first. I don't know.
You can go first, Jordie.
Sounds good. So Jordie Vazquez here. I would say I'm trained as an architect. I have worn many hats throughout my professional career. At time that has been by design, and other time it has been, as I would say, a mix of opportunity and desire to grow. One thing that I would mention about my professional journey, it has always been constant at a need to have social impact. So from architecture, I decided to move into more community development work. So I worked with a company that did work around resiliency and repair for Hurricane Sandy. That led me into opportunities of energy efficiency for affordable housing. And eventually from that position, I transitioned into a more sustainability and energy efficiency role. While we're working with real estate developers and architects and designers trying to build and design the most sustainable, high efficient buildings possible. So I would say my background in a couple words, it has been at the intersection of architecture, community development, and sustainability for the last 7 years, without giving my age away, 7 or 8 years now. But it has been a lot of fun. It has been a lot of growth, and I'm excited to see where my professional journey is going to take me the next few years.
Awesome. And Chante?
Yeah, Jordie's awesome. Excuse me. Thanks for having us. Chante Harris. So I have a pretty untraditional background. I started out my career doing a lot of all the political wonky stuff you could think of during the Obama administration when I lived in DC. So I launched national issue-based campaigns and also worked on a lot of different policies and research, thinking about everything from sort of women's empowerment to how do we reassess the war on poverty 50 years later and look at common sense policies that actually get us towards some of the goals that were laid out, decades ago. And then I transitioned from DC to New York and came here really to participate in a fellowship program focused on public affairs, which was a really huge stepping stone for me because I got to work across various sectors on everything from healthy neighborhood initiatives on the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to sort of helping to launch one of the first alternatives to justice for juvenile folks so that they didn't end up in prison, essentially. Really focused on the Bronx and Brooklyn at that time. And after I finished the fellowship program, I ended up at a company where I've essentially been a growth strategist for every type of company, from early stage startups to growth stage ventures to really established, older companies that have been in the sustainability, tech, and innovation space, helping them scale through everything from pilot projects to procurement opportunities to strategic partnerships. And that's really how I started out my sustainability careers, was starting to work with companies that had some of the solutions and technologies that aligned with a lot of New York City and New York State's policy goals. So that's me.
Awesome. So one thing I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry, is that woke sis is kind of like the acronym for women of color and sustainability for the audience. So sorry about that. And ladies, correct me if that is correct. Do you guys also call it woke sis, or am I just?
You are right.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
I swore I heard it somewhere, and it was at one of the events and stuff. So I just wanted to make sure I clarified that.
Yeah, the full name's a bit long, so we wanted something shorter to say.
So yeah, if you guys can just go ahead and talk a little about Woke Sis and how you guys met and why you guys decided to start the organization.
Sure. I can take a stab at this and let you, Chante, wrap it up at the end. So Chante and I met during Climate Week, and I want to say, Chante, when was this? 2018?
Maybe. I think it was 2018. I think it was 2018.
I think it was 2018 too. So it was a while ago. And we were at an event, I believe it was with representatives of fashion, sustainability, and the merge of those two. The point being is that eventually throughout the event, I noticed that there was definitely a lack of women, lack of women of color. And I looked at my corner, the left side of my eye caught Chante there. Somehow we ended gravitating towards each other, and that's something that we were discussing, this is a very interesting topic in sustainability and fashion. How come there are no more women of color in the room? So after that, we exchanged contact and, said, let's keep in touch with, if you hear about another event regarding sustainability, let's just keep each other in a radar and inform each other about, what's happening out there. And eventually, for the months that follow, we would share events, we would share resources, email threads that would come my way or would come her way. And I want to say that, around July, early July, we were having a drink and said, this is great that we're doing this work, keeping each other informed. But I, on my end, in architecture and design, I feel like there's a big gap and there's not enough community for women of color out there in sustainability. And Chante shared the same. It's something that resonated with her. There was a lack of resources for women of color, lack of job opportunity, disability, mentorship, you call it.
Right.
And I don't know, I would say it was 2 drinks down that we're let's just start something ourselves. It's just, if it's not out there, why not make it ourselves? And I want to say that that's the night or the day that Woxis sort of took form, the idea. And over the following weeks, we worked on the name and what was the goal, what were the pillars that we wanted to create. And I want to say that today is July 14. It's almost been a year that we said to each other, we want to make something. It's been busy ever since July 2019. Chante, do you want to take it over?
I feel like you covered everything. Yeah, we met at an event, became friends, and I think also from that relationship recognized that there was a gap in terms of not only who was in the room for a lot of the events and discussions that both Jordie and I were part of, but I think more broadly in the sustainability industry, a lack of really amplifying the woman that did exist. We knew we weren't the only ones. So we were how do we find more of these women, and how do we bring everyone together really for community first, but then also make sure that we create pathways for women to continue to be able to, I think, grow in their industry, in this industry, and also propel forward, right, into leadership roles and get the, I think, the spotlight that they deserve. So yeah, that's, I think Jordie covered pretty much our story. Thanks, Jordie.
One thing that I would mention is like a lot of the conversations that we're having today about how there's a lack of diversity at the top level, executive level. These are things that I remember clearly Chante and I discussing, like why are there more women of color at the board of where I'm working at or at the executive level. So those are things I would say like definitely cement the idea of like we need to make something and we need to work on the visibility and opportunities for more women to be up there.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, when I first discovered you guys, I was like really, really excited. I'll never forget. I think my first event is the one you guys held, and Akila Stewart from Fatra spoke, and it was just like a really great event. And I was just really not only inspired and everything, but I was just really, really encouraged as a woman of color within the space. So yes, thank you for moving forward with this. Because, there's definitely a lack of voices, elevated voices. So thank you so much for doing this. It's an amazing organization, and I can't wait to see what you guys have coming up. In addition to a few things that we're going to mention today. So I would love to know, how do you guys intend to continue to make an impact?
I think the sky's the limit. I feel like when we started it, and Jordie can attest to it, we didn't necessarily have a long-term vision. I think it was just recognizing like this is a space that is in dire need of like bringing community to women of color. And so how do we just start that, right? And I think it's kind of the beautiful thing about any awesome community, but I think really anything that is built that actually fills a need or fills a gap is that it really comes from knowing that there is a desire to have access to something, right? Or something doesn't exist yet and you want to create it. And I think we started it really just to kind of see, I mean, even our first event, like how many women will show up, like how much interest will there be? And the funny story behind that is our first event, we were like, oh, we'll have like 10 to 15 people there. Like, it's not going to be no one knows who we are. Like we just launched. There's like, there's not going to be too much interest. And we ended up having over 40 RSVPs, and that like little section of the bar that we said we were only going to have 10 people at was way more than 10 people. We're pretty sure at this point that bar will never let us host it again. But I think that was kind of the beauty of it, and even the first event, and hearing what you just said, even that like thank you for starting this. It was always like, how do we I saw Jordie as a peer within my industry that I could turn to, that I could invite into spaces. And, it was really, how do we expand that to more women? Like we want to build that same type of friendship and, desire to support one another across, I think a platform or, collective, right, of women that want to do that for each other. We've definitely come up with how we, we're intending to scale, and then, COVID hit. So I think everyone's kind of had to pivot and really think about how do they continue to have an impact at this time. I think the beautiful thing about community is like, it's always relevant, right? Like building community is always important. I think particularly right now in light of, us having to kind of isolate ourselves and not necessarily see the people that we want to see and do the things that we, would normally get to do. I feel like community is actually more important than ever. I think layering that on with this discussion that Jordie alluded to earlier, that, I think we were kind of just ahead of the movement, right, around why aren't there more diverse faces, not only within companies, but at the leadership level, and why it's not that we don't exist, right? It's that we're not actually being propelled within our organizations, within our companies, or, we're the only one. And so I think those two things combined means that actually now is a really great time to continue to have an impact and to think about our long-term impact. And so all of that to say that, we haven't stopped building community, as you've probably seen, right? I mean, if anything, you know, we've gained a lot of followers. We've been building out the Google group that we have, or the Google group or listserv that we have. We're still sending our newsletters. Jordie's been amazing, and now we went from monthly newsletters to bi-weekly newsletters. And you know, we are also, you know, posting pretty regularly on our social media, highlighting women. Like, that's really a big thing. It's like, how do we highlight more women of color in the space? And then, you know, I won't go into the details because I imagine we'll talk about it later, but we just today launched our, or made the site live for our summit that's coming up in about 2 weeks. So when I think about like what our impact can continue to be, I think it's definitely not going to be linear, because right now nothing feels controllable. But, you know, I think we want to continue to grow this community. We want to continue to host, you know, events and build spaces where women can show up and talk about their experience in the industry, and also share, you know, stories and tips about how to really move forward and propel themselves within their workplace or within you know, organizations that they're a part of. And then I'll say lastly, are really I think a goal that is actually not as far as it might feel to us at the moment is, how do we turn this into like a real digital platform for women? And so that's something we've been thinking a lot about, is how do we sort of create something that's tech enabled and allows women to, you know, log on and experience, you know, I think just a safe space to share ideas and thoughts and community with one another. So I'm going to stop there. And Jordie, feel free to add on. But, you know, it's something we're thinking about. I imagine everything that I said will change as well. But I think those are all things that we're excited about. So.
Yeah, and I just have to say, so in terms of the newsletter, and for those of you listening, definitely sign up for the newsletter. Ladies, like, so far, like, I found out about so much resources through the newsletter. So things like grants and other, like, there's so much information in all of the newsletters. So it's something that is so incredibly valuable. So that's one thing I definitely have to say. It's like, there's so much information that are in those newsletters. So I found out about a lot of resources through them. So it's something I'm very, very grateful for as someone within the space. So
that makes me so happy to hear.
We love to see it or hear it, because we can't see it right now.
Oh, no, it's really, really good. So yeah, let's just go ahead right into talking about the Collective Resiliency Summit and the fund. When I saw that, especially the fund, I know you guys like did that, kind of like launched that a little while ago. So I'd love to know, how's that been going for you guys, and is that going to relaunch? Is that something you guys still want to do in the future? And then also, yeah, the upcoming summit, which is something I'm really excited about, actually.
Sure. I can speak a little bit about the fund. So basically, the way this started is that, you know, internally we have, I want to say, a good hand of sister organizations that are either doing similar work to what we're doing, or have been with us since the inception of BOSES. As mentors, as supporters, as, you know, fans, you name it. Like, there's a core group that we have been able to share this journey with. And one of them approached us right in the middle of COVID and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a fund together so we can raise money? I had this capital allocated that I want to work with and specifically distribute it to women of color pioneers in sustainability. What do you think of it? And we're just like, yeah, of course. We jumped in it, like, I would say in negative 0.1 seconds. We were like, let's do this. And then there was one more organization that was also interested. So the three of us, I would say, got together and said, okay, let's come up with a list of criteria. We definitely want it to be, well, at the end, like, our core is to amplify the voices of women of color. So we want to make sure that women of color are going to be the front and center of who the applicant profile is going to be. We want to hear about them and how COVID has impacted their professional work. And we developed a list of criteria that were specifically for thinking in our members and what could be the most useful resource. And I think a lot of us would say that at the time of COVID, a lot of us were laid off, or our resources were, you know, running dire. So we said, let's select 10 women. 5 of them are going to be young professionals who are our main core for memberships, and 5 of them are going to be students who are one of the organization's main base. And we decided that the amount was going to be $300, so we can spread it across 10 different grants. And we opened up a Patreon page, opened up a GoFundMe, and the application all in, I would say, the beginning of June.
Mm-hmm.
The deadline was June 29th, I want to say. Perhaps June, we pushed it for a couple of days to allow for the last few submissions to go in. Mm-hmm. And we had an overwhelming response. The amount of, just talent that was outpouring in the application of, this is my startup idea. I would love to use the $300 to register my business, or $300 to take a lead class. We have a lot of homework to do in the next few days selecting these, because they're
Don't remind me, Jordie.
It's gonna be so hard. I still don't know how I'm gonna only choose or pick 5, because the other organization is also gonna pick 5.
Okay.
So we, in the application, one thing to know, like, we even included data and statistics about how women of color are one of the, let's say, demographics mostly affected when COVID happened, and just put a bunch of different resources out there besides the application itself, of like what organizations, specifically environmental and sustainability organizations, can do in the times of COVID and / racial injustice and everything that was happening. Like, within 90 days, we had another civil rights movement, we had COVID, we had a Great Depression. So it was just a lot. And it's still a lot. We're still looking at the effects of COVID, still looking at the effects of the economy. And in our eyes, I want to say that this is just the beginning. I see this fund for the next few days. We're going to be reviewing the applications and selecting 10 applicants and awarding the funds at the end of the month during our summit. But I see this as another, a recurring fund, something that we can do. I don't know if we're going to be doing it monthly, but at least one more time before the summer ends. And who knows, maybe we can do it again in the fall. Mm-hmm. But this is something that opened a can of worms in both of us, in for the good sense. Like, I feel like I want to do this every month now, because there's the need there. There's an interest in working with women who are, young professionals and young business owners and entrepreneurs that need the resources and need the help. So that's how the idea came about. Is there anything you want to add, Chante? I feel like I've spoken a lot.
No, not really. I guess it's just funny because you asked the question earlier about how do we think about, continuing to have an impact. And I did not mention the fund at all, but I think that's one of the most impactful initiatives that we launched. And, agreeing 100% with Jordie, we do see this as just the initial start to something like this. I mean, the reality is, COVID is not going anywhere for a while. And so I think, not to sound completely morbid, but, we're really at a tipping point where I think we've only just started to see its effect on the economy and its effect on unemployment. And so I think all of that to say that if we can continue to be a vehicle that provides people with the support, even if it's, small, to be able to, I think, not only sustain themselves, but also continue to go after their dreams, because our dreams do matter as well. I think that is something that we really want to own, and are just happy that we can even be a part of it. And we have partners, right, that are supporting us and not only launching, but continuing this fund. And so it's been really amazing to see the incredible support and the amount of people reaching out and saying, what can we do? What can we do? And we launched a Patreon account and a GoFundMe that people are donating to for this fund. So my hope is that we can continue to provide grants to, those who really need it, or those who are aspiring to do great things with it. But, we'll see. And I'm sure we'll have another announcement coming down the line around the fund.
Oh, it's so amazing. So how about the summit, which is coming up, which is something I'm really excited about?
Yeah, so the summit, we're excited about it too. We knew we wanted to do a summit probably when we honestly first launched Woke Sis, but obviously when we were planning for a summit, we were thinking it'd be in person. So I think actually probably like before the end of 2019, Jordie and I had already put some feelers out to like potential speakers and people who we thought might even want to participate in like a half-day summit. And I think we were trying to do too much at that time, because we also launched which we didn't talk about at all, but we launched a campaign focused called Sustainability Pioneers. And the whole premise of it was really, how do we highlight women of color who are trailblazing, who are really making paths or creating paths for more women to come behind them and doing great, innovative, cool things. And we launched that around the holiday season. And so that kind of took up, I think, a lot of our time. Jordie's an amazing creative that I'm lucky to work with through Wokesis. And we did a photo shoot and then basically posted all of those photos on our social media. And we were actually planning to do another one in the spring, but COVID, so that didn't happen. But anyways, back to my original point, which is we were planning to do a summit maybe around that time as well, but it just didn't work out because of timing reasons. So now fast forward to COVID and whatever this world is now, we are basically like, look, we don't know when we'll actually be able to host an in-person event again, right? And certainly not a summit like with what we were hoping would be hundreds of people. And so how do we still provide that value to the amazing women that are involved or aren't involved yet, right? And so the Collective Resiliency Summit is basically what we decided to do, which is a virtual all-day event that pulls together all different types of leaders and change makers and entrepreneurs that are in the sustainability space. And I think are not just, I think this is really important to say, because it's something that really irks me, are not just advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, yes, we do that. I think because of our lived experiences of people of color, we always think about things in a nuanced way. We're always cognizant of all of the, I think the layers, right, of what it means to do any work in any industry being a person of color. And we think it's really important to highlight that that's important work. We do it inevitably, whether we want to or not. But we also are experts in so many other things, right? Like we're experts in architecture, right? Jordie's an architect by training. We're experts in policy, energy policy. We're expert in, actually thinking through climate solutions across the globe. We're experts in founding companies that sell sustainable products. We're experts in fashion and thinking about supply chain. So how do we make sure that we create a platform that acknowledges all of the layers of who we are, that presents us as multifaceted people that are, people of color and, industry professionals that are women and are experts in our fields. And so that's really what we're hoping to do through this summit. And like I said, it's an all-day summit starting. Now we've changed the time to 10 a.m., trying to be cognizant of time zones, because we realized we had a lot of folks from the West Coast joining our collective, and we kept making everything like super early for them. So now we're like, okay, how do we be cognizant of when we start things? 10 a.m. is still early, but we know that it's going to go all the way from 10 a.m. to 5:15 p.m. And so the day really consists of all different types of conversations, as I was mentioning. So wellness as community resilience, of looking at, I think, the tie between sustainability, community, and wellness. We're doing a panel, which I'm really excited. We actually confirmed the speakers today on urban innovation. So Taj, the Black man who runs the investment arm of Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, and then also Chante Harris, who runs mobility at Elemental Accelerator, which is an accelerator for companies that are focused on circular economy, so water, agriculture, mobility. Peggy has been incredible and offered to do our keynote, so we're just confirming that now. So we do have a lot of speakers that we've reached out to, and we've been getting a bunch of emails today with mostly everyone saying yes, that they can definitely do it, so that's exciting. That's pretty much the day in a nutshell. There's obviously a lot more to it, but we're just excited to be able to convene different workshops, panels, experts to talk about all of the different things that are sustainability, and also being able to draw attention to the grantees that we're going to announce that day.
Oh, amazing. So you definitely answered a couple of questions that I had, but
Sorry.
No, it's totally fine. No, it's totally fine. But I definitely want to talk about Medium because I know you guys are on Medium now. So I would love to. I'm thinking about applying to be on the Medium too. So I would love to know if are you guys still open to contributors and stuff like that? Because I think that's amazing as well. It's just like another way that you guys are providing a space for women of color in the space. So I'd love for you guys to talk about that a little bit if you like.
Sure thing. I can jump in this one. And just something I wanted to say about the summit. Let's say you're getting inside scoop. Nobody knows all the details.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
You should be really excited. I'm excited to see who's going to be on the panels. I'm excited to see the wealth of different backgrounds we're going to be able to convene. So I'm just overall with joy for what's going to come on July 31st.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. So for Medium, so Chante, both her and I have our like different outlets or creative thinking. Like I have Urban Insights, which is a platform for it's a slash of photography and content for sustainability champions and locals out there that are doing great work. I write about them, learn and expose their work. And then Chante has Urban Underpinning, right, Chante?
Yes, Urban Underpinning. Yeah. I'm like, it's new, so that's why I'm like, oh, right, I do have that thing.
I, for one, I realized, especially during COVID, that my best way, my creative outlet has to be writing. Like, I love writing. I would do writing any day instead of like speaking in front of a big audience. I know Chante will disagree with me in this one, but I found that for me, it was a good way of not only putting my thoughts down, but also getting my creative juices working. Mm-hmm. So we always wanted to create a part of, I would say, our website or our branch that allow women of color to also expose their creative thinking so we can amplify their voices and their work. And we opened up Medium, I want to say maybe 2 months ago. And we used to leverage a couple of different things. So not only did we spoke about the fund there, we share a lot of resources regarding Black Lives Matters. And as Chante mentioned before, like, yes, we do a lot of work with climate justice, environmental justice, but we do so much more than that. Architecture, social innovation, tech. So we wanted to make sure that whatever space that we're going to open up for women to collaborate, they felt comfortable coming up with their ideas, whatever idea that was within sustainability, and they could see this as a potential way of exposing them. So the open call is there. It will always be there. We are very grateful that we have a new volunteer, Shrima, who you're going to be hearing about soon. Really? Yeah, she's awesome. And she's going to be helping us with the Medium, not only like editing, but also identifying women who can potentially collaborate. Okay. And, you know, we have a couple of submissions are in queue that we're excited to share in the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, if you want to write something and pitch it, we're more than happy to see submissions. And we're really looking forward to like a wide range of it. As I mentioned before, if you have an idea on art and sustainability or in fashion sustainability, we're open to hear everything because that's pretty much our membership. Is as the variety of sustainability that we have, it's something else. So we want to make sure that our medium reflects that.
Yes, no, it's so good to hear. So just to piggyback off that, I love that you guys, in terms of your professional backgrounds, it's because like the fashion industry conversation, the climate conversation is definitely, I feel, a little bit more common. So I would love to, if you guys feel like it, if you'd like to, just expand a little bit on like your individual industries within sustainability, because I don't think that these industries necessarily get the same amount of attention that the fashion industry does, but that's just from my perspective. So I love if you guys could just like...
we don't know what you're talking about now.
Fashion sustainability
but yeah, there's definitely, I just feel like those different areas are not talked about on the same scale. So I'd love if you guys could just talk about like your experiences and either it's general or specific ones where you realize there's definitely a lack within your individual fields.
Sure. I guess I can jump on this one first. I would say when it comes to the intersection of fashion and sustainability and even environmental justice, there's such a great pool of talent that exists already in that field. I would say that a lot of our members and a lot of the people that we're fangirling over here are already doing work on that ground, and their work is amazing. So we can talk about all the different people that we follow that does fashion sustainability and not end today, because there's a lot, and women of color. Yeah. So in terms of my background, so I mentioned I'm an architect, but I work also in community development and sustainability and energy. I would say it's a little hard to understand how I ended up where I am without going a little bit backwards, and what made me decide that I wanted to devote my professional journey to sustainability. So I like to say that at some point, architects, like, we have two different options. We can either go the route of like business as usual and do high rise buildings that are, withstanding the test of time, or we can decide to do buildings that are better for the environment, are healthier places, and are places that we eventually want to be keeping for our, living, working, and playing. So at some point after I was working with not only apartments, but different building types that were affected by Hurricane Sandy, I started not only being interested in working on like the consequences of this is what climate change does, and here we are trying to repair. I wanted to understand what the root causes were of like, okay, so climate and global warming, like these are the causes of what I'm dealing with right now at work in architecture. So I decided at that point on in 2015 that any work that I was going to take had to be to create better buildings out there. Buildings, unfortunately, are attributed to like 40%, I want to say, of carbon emissions. And that's a lot. So if we're now looking at how do we designing more energy efficient, more sustainable, then like what are we doing as architects or designers, And then lastly, just to mention here, there's so much that goes into design. And as you mentioned, it doesn't get like all the rep. But as architects and designers and engineers, we have to deal with all kinds of different things, not only in the energy side, we're looking at the materials, we're looking at how are we designing urban areas. There's also like the landscape portion of it. There's also like, how do we design cities that are healthy? How do we decide not to build that coal-fired plant or that landfill, that waste treatment plant? There's so many different things that I find exciting and interesting within architecture and design and sustainability that I think should get a bigger rep. But, nerdy us, we don't talk enough about it. But I think we're at a point where the folks that do work in urban planning and architecture, engineering, city design, they're getting more exposure. And that's something definitely with Woxes that we want to be able to do. How do we connect those people that are, as Chante had mentioned before, the talent, it's already out there. How do we make sure that you are aware of me, that I'm aware of you, and then we can create community together? That was a long explanation to your question.
It's okay. No problem at all. No, it's not a problem.
And I'll let the co-founder take on all the many hats that she wears, which are
I feel like, so what's funny is like, while Jordie and I do separate work, I do feel like it overlaps a lot. I do want to start off by saying, I'm not here to diminish, and I know Jordie isn't either, diminish the great work in sustainable fashion. I think it's so important, and it's not just what you buy. It's again the supply chain. It's textiles. It's where are these clothes being created? Are they made? How are they being manufactured? Who's manufacturing them? Do they have a living wage? Do they have healthy living conditions? Right? Is their quality of life actually being supported? A good quality of life being supported through their employment? And so I think those are all really important questions that amazing sustainable fashion professionals and advocates talk about all the time. And I think, what we recognize pretty early on in launching Wokesis is that I think maybe let's be frank, like fashion is also, I think, just a sexier topic for most people to talk about. And that's like across the board, even you can take the sustainability out of it. I think people are just more drawn to talking about fashion because we all interact with it every day. We have to figure out what we're going to wear and how we're going to look. And so I think that is why it's happening, or why I think I've perceived, and most people perceive it as being one of the sectors within or industries within the sustainability sector that kind of it gets amplified all the time, and it's important, but there are all of these other pieces, right? And so I come from a policy sort of turn business and growth strategist, background. And so when I think of sustainability, it is, I think it not so much different, but it definitely varies, right, from a lot of other ways that people might enter talking about the sustainability industry or thinking about the sustainability industry. So the built environment, how we get around mobility, access to food. I did some work with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and it became very clear to me as we were talking about public health and social determinants of health that so much of it intersected on the policy side with, sustainability and things like heat islands and,
Right.
who experiences them the most and who also has higher asthma rates. And that's not by mistake. I mean, that's by design. If you look at how New York City was built, like I know we've probably all heard of the horror that was Robert Moses, right? And his intentional desire to create a city and build a city with infrastructure that divided people, separated them, and also, is doing exactly what he intended for it to do, to rope people off from access, whether that be access to upward mobility, upward economic mobility, access to jobs, access to specific landmarks within the city. I mean, let's talk about beaches, right? And so I think all of that stuff is sort of how I approach sustainability. And I don't think I'm unique in that way, but I think there are so many other parts to the discussion that Jordie's already alluded to that really do intersect. And I think there are engineers, there are, there are urban planners, there are architects like Jordie, there are policymakers that are really thinking about overall, like, how do you talk about, because I'm in a city and a lot of my work is focused on cities, like, how do you talk about a city that is resilient, that is sustainable, that is accessible, that is inclusive? And so I think that a lot of that hasn't been a key part of the discussion, but it is so important, so important. And I think one other thing that I want to name that I think is super critical is I also feel that the tie to talking about sustainable fashion has to do with, sort of what the consumer can do, which is so important, right? Every day we should be thinking about how our actions can actually help save our environment. And I mean, let's be real, there are corporations, there are businesses that have immense impact on our environment, right? Simply because of the way that they actually produce, the way that they, operate. And so I think to not talk about that too is such a missed opportunity, but it also won't get us towards where we want to be in terms of actually combating climate change. So I think about that a lot, being able to work with very large companies and actually support them in, deploying sustainable products, doing it in an inclusive way, because I was the only woman, the only young woman, and the only Black woman in the room most of the time for a lot of these discussions. And so it became very clear to me that, when we talk about deploying products and solutions and policies, if you don't have the communities that are most impacted, in the room, a part of the conversation, then a lot of times people don't even really think to talk about like what it means to include them in the process, and not just include them, but also think about the long-term effects of either including them or not including them. And so I think that's one thing that comes to mind for me, because when I was doing, or as I've been doing this work, local law 97 passed, and that requires buildings to cut their emissions. Right. And buildings account for such a huge part of the carbon emissions that we experience in the city. And then a lot of the detrimental impacts that we actually see from climate change. So, I get to sit on the side of, hey, I'm working with a startup, I'm working with this growth stage venture, I'm working with this really big company, and they want to figure out how to retrofit a building. They want to figure out how to implement their sensors and their technologies to better understand heat islands. They want to figure out how to have the city invest in local green infrastructure projects. Mm-hmm. And so I work across a lot of different sectors. So I think the way that I think about sustainability is very nuanced and layered. And I think that's how a lot of women of color think about it as well. And so it's exciting to see that. I think now we're seeing a shift because of COVID, and everyone's like, what is going on here? How do I live in the city where like there's no green space near me? I can't get access to fresh food. Like, it's becoming more amplified, right? The lack of how we've built infrastructure and design to actually create a great quality of life and also a sustainable future. And so, I'm seeing in some ways an optimistic viewpoint, because people are finally like, we got to design cities better. We just got to do this better. So that's exciting. And that's kind of how I look at, the sustainability industry as a whole, and some of the sectors that I think don't always get as much attention, but are just as, if not even more important.
Yes, I couldn't agree with that more. Oh my gosh. And that's another thing that I really love about you guys. Because I've always been aware of all of these different areas, and being someone that is more focused on the sustainable fashion side, we can kind of be in a bubble a little bit. So I've learned about so many like resources through you guys that are like, involved in a lot of these other sectors. So it's definitely really, really important. So I definitely value that. So I would love to know, like, because all of these things are really heavy, right? Sustainability, it's like a lot, there's a lot of problems, and you add the layer of race and inequity and all that stuff. So I'd love to know, like, how do you guys like take care of yourselves with all of this knowledge? Because I feel like people who are experts within this space, you know so much, and you're aware of the scale and the magnitude of a lot of these issues, on top of just being a human, right? So I would love to know, how do you balance, if that's, if you can, but it's just like, how do you manage it all in terms of like your mental health?
Well, for me, I would say like right in the midst of it, like looking at March and April, I had to lean a lot on I wanted to, but I tried not to use social media as much as I wanted to, and try to like limit the intake that I was getting. I didn't disconnect myself completely, because I do keep in touch with a lot of people from Dominican Republic, where I grew up, through social media. So I then turned to like, what are the creative outlets that I have? Thankfully, I had family that was staying with me during that time, so it's nice to have people around. I have friends that were unable to see their loved ones for many weeks, and I can imagine, having been through that, like that must have been super difficult. But I was able to lean on my parents, and I was able to lean on writing for as long as I could think of. So for me, the best way to take care of myself was, here we are in this virtual world. Let's see what we can do. I taught my mom how to use Zoom, which was interesting. So we would do our Zoom calls with my grandmother and like other family members. I was able to, spend more time cooking at home, as before it was probably 1 or 2 times I was able to do it myself in the week with work and, other activities. So I was, at some point, like, you get to like go from, I would say, denial into acceptance. So like, this is our current situation right now. I have to adapt, either taking care of myself health-wise, food and cooking. And I didn't get to do meditation like I have friends that did, but I did get to draw and paint a lot. And that, I would say, is a form of meditation for me.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I really lean on Wuxes. For me, as there was like a couple of weeks that I was in furlough because, COVID, and the situation was just a little uncomfortable for everyone. And I'm really thankful that I had, Wuxes, and I'm thankful that I had Chante to bounce ideas with and say, okay, there's this time. Like, we were able during that time to not only register the business officially, the LLC, we were able to launch our website, we were able to do so many different things that I feel like if we didn't have that break time, unfortunately, but we try to make the best out of the situation that we could. So just in a nutshell, I can tell you, like, really thankful of having certain people in my life, and really thankful that I was able to make the best with what I had at the time. But yeah, there was a lot, and just to wrap it up, there were a lot of conversations after, like the shock of COVID. There are a lot of conversations of like, okay, you are a voice and a lead in environmental justice and climate justice, because everyone looks at you. If you're working in an organization that does conservation or environmental work, if you're a person of color, you're automatically the voice of reason. You're automatically the environmental justice fighter. So there was a lot of strain, you know, there was a lot of work to undo that. And not only are we only dealing with our own problems through our COVID and through racial tensions and things like that, now I have to also support you, and I can do that. So there were a lot of conversations that had to take place where like, you need to educate yourself, you need to do the hard work on your own. And then we can have a productive conversation about what race means in all of this mess that we're in. So yeah, there was a lot. I would say like this last 3 months, I could tell you it feels like the last 3 years for me at least.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah. How about you, Chante?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking this question. I think mental health is so important, and I feel like also we're in a culture where everyone's kind of starting something and leading something, which I think is so important. And more recently, I think people have become a lot more transparent. Right, building anything is hard. Creating anything from scratch is difficult. And then you layer that with full-time jobs and a couple other hats that me and Jordie also wear. And then, a global pandemic and Black Lives Matter. It's like, it's hard. And so I think like, how do we do it? How do we do it all? It's like, sometimes we don't, and I think like that's important to name, not only from my own founder journey, but also, I work with startups, I work with people who are scaling businesses. And I think, I think we have a tendency that now is being kind of ripped apart at last, but a tendency to kind of idolize, right, people who are creating things and are building things, which, it's great that we are. I'm happy that Jordie and I started this. And, sometimes we don't get it right. Sometimes things that were supposed to happen don't happen. Sometimes we miss deadlines. And I think the way that I think about mental health is giving myself the freedom to make mistakes, to not do it all, and to remember that that doesn't mean not doing anything, but I think really learning to prioritize what actually matters, and what's really most important. And so, I outside of that, I obviously have my own sort of self-care routine that I've been working on for years, and I think is now starting to settle in as something that I can really own and call my own. But I also feel like earlier, Jordie said, Wokesis is also part of our self-care. And it really is. I think being in the sustainability industry, also being fairly, 4 years ago, it was pretty new for me. I didn't know that much about it. And I was on the consulting side of things. And so I definitely dealt with imposter syndrome, feeling like maybe I didn't know enough to be consulting these companies, some of them really large global companies, right? And over time, just realized like, no, we have our own qualifications, our unique understandings of the industry that we bring that actually a lot of other people can't. And so how do we start to own that as something that's like our superpower, right? That thing that makes us ask for a raise, that makes us ask for a promotion, because it actually has an impact not only on the communities that we care about, but also on companies' bottom lines. Like, you can't leave out an entire demographic of people on climate change. Like, you can't. We just won't solve it, right? And so I think that's kind of the funny and also beautiful thing about sustainability is like we need everyone to be a part of the solution. And so I think Wokesis has really made me feel like I have other women, right? So many of them who've been in this industry way longer than me, right? Like, they're veterans. They've been fighting the good fight. They've been leading companies. They've been running organizations for a really long time. And I'm happy that like now I know of them and now they know of me. And, we're building this space where people can kind of show up, and whether you've been in the industry for a year or you've been in the industry for 20 years, right? Like, we're figuring out how to create a what I feel like is sort of a pipeline of achievement for one another, like creating success among one another, which is really exciting. So, yeah.
I totally resonate with both of you guys. It definitely has been a lot. And I think I was just talking to someone else about this. It's just like, I think when you're moving from spirit, that's something that I've been telling myself, is just moving from spirit to just remain grounded in what your work is, as an individual. And I feel like that fuels us, right? Like, it keeps us moving, but also grounded at the same time. And it really helps us manage it all.
Right. Yeah.
Everything. So, in the spirit of support, so I'd love to know is at least any resources that you guys are comfortable with sharing with the audience. Are there any specific like programs, initiatives that you'd like to shout out that are just like resources that people who are looking to start something similar to Woke Sis that you're willing to share, or like if you have anything off the top of your head, any like other resources that you guys like believe in or love.
Well, there's this awesome newsletter that comes out like bi-weekly. That includes a lot. But jokes aside,
Who sends that newsletter, Jordie? No, I'm kidding.
I wonder who. No, but jokes aside, I'll be very short with this. There's two things that jump to mind. One is the SBS Fast Track. It's a course that's, I would say it's what, like 8 weeks? I'm sorry for all the fast trackers that might be listening right now.
I've actually joined that program. I know exactly what she's talking about. I did that years ago.
You did it?
Yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue. Sorry.
No. I mean, you liked it? I loved it.
Yes.
And I had to do it virtually because it just coincided with the beginning of COVID. So for me, it was a very unique experience. Like, I think it was right in the middle of March, and here we are, like, everyone's confused about, life and everything. But I had that constant 6 to 9 on Mondays and Wednesday. And like, it became, a nice little circle of, how's your day going right now? How are you dealing with this pandemic? And how are you going to start your business in the middle of it?
Yeah.
So, the focus was very interesting. And not only was there an amazing communities of women entrepreneurs. I did the female venture that had, everything from like initial design into I've launched a year ago and I'm looking into pivot. It was just for me an amazing resource, not only from the people that were in it, from the instructors, but also from all the resources they share inside the program. So I would recommend that one to anyone who's looking into starting a business. And get it to meet other women who are also in the same boat.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. How about you, Chante?
Yeah, I guess obviously the fund, like folks should just stay tuned because we're hoping to give out more grants if they're looking to start something. Outside of that, I think there's just like tools that I wish I had known about like even 2 years ago. So we use Patreon now to basically support what we're doing, and it's an easy way to take supporters and people who love your work and basically get them to give you a monthly donation, which is really lovely. So you can continue creating and curating the things that you love. Like if you don't have it for your podcast, you totally should. And then I think Medium, I think I love Medium. And, now there are other types of, I guess platforms like Medium out there, but Medium was one of the first. The fact that people can go on and publish their own articles, right? You don't have to go through, finding an editor or someone who will publish your pieces, or you can make announcements, right? And like even with the Collective Resiliency Fund, I think the fact that we were able to lay out the whole story behind it, why we started it, the criteria, who's involved, and put that all in one link, like you couldn't do that like 5 years ago, right? And so I think those types of platforms are really awesome platforms. I mean, when I'm thinking about payment processing, Stripe, just because I feel like all of the two tools I just listed also sync with Stripe. So, you want to figure out financially how you can receive payments. Also, one of my friends works for a great company called Grasshopper Bank. And they're the first digital bank ever. And they're owned by a woman. And they are specifically looking to support people who I think historically have had a really hard time getting access to banking options, affordable banking options, non-discriminatory banking options, which is so important. And so those are a few that come to mind. I'm sure there's a bunch of others, but and thinking about like, business stuff, like what are ways that you can, I think, generate revenue and also kind of own your narrative. I think Medium, Grasshopper Bank, Stripe, and Patreon are all really neat tools that like just didn't exist before,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll definitely look that up. Grasshopper Bank, right?
Yeah, they're very new. They've raised like over $150 million recently for their, and I know the founder's incredible and she's so mission aligned and wants to see women and the global majority like, really get access to the banking options they need. So
yeah, there's definitely a gap there. It's definitely a great cause. Okay, ladies, so we're gonna come to a close, but in the spirit of, I always like to ask all my guests this. So in the spirit of conscious consumerism, is there an item of clothing or another item that you cherish specifically that you can think of? If not, no worries.
I would say on my case, there's like this really old rag that I used to go to Trader Joe's, and it's been used and abused and washed and overwashed for like years now, but I can't get rid of it. It's just super comfortable to take it to the groceries or any kind of shopping. So I would say if you have a nice cloth bag that you can take with you to the farmer's market or to your groceries that you love, hey, keep it. Like, I mean, mine has been with me for like 4 years, I think. That would be my one. And the only thing I would say is like before COVID, I loved thrift shopping. I'm a big fan. So I have in my closet some pretty cool, interesting pieces.
Yeah.
So I'll go with an open mind. You never know what you can find. So good things. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I love thrift shopping too. How about you, Chante?
Yeah, I feel like I have a couple of like my mom's vintage pieces that like I have this really cool blazer that she had that well, technically it was a dress now that I think about it, but I've worn it as a dress, as a blazer, as a jacket, like and I just cherish that because I think when we think about, right, like consumerism, like there's just so many things that we actually don't need, right? And there's so many things that come back in style. And I love this like jacket, dress, blazer, right? And so I think, and I didn't even buy it, right? Like my mom bought it like 30 years ago, and it has these beautiful gold buttons on it. And I just think it kind of, to me, represents what it means to, when I think about my own sustainability journey and like what it's meant for me to dive into this industry, but really own my own story around sustainability. It's been, how do I reuse things? How do I consume less? And how do I honor like all of the great things that already exist, you know?
Right.
So when I like, yeah, when I wear this jacket, my mom's so trendy and beautiful, I'm like, this is like generational, right? And it really is. Like we have defined sustainability differently for generations. And so I think owning that is such a beautiful thing. And maybe I'm reading too deep into like my mom's jacket, but I love it. And I think that's kind of like the story I've told myself around it. So
No, not at all. I think like having those stories about particular items is key to sustainability when we think about the value of things. So yeah, I totally hear you. So yeah, guys, like if you could just remind the audience of your website, any emails, or any other specific ways that the audience can get in touch with you.
Sure. So I would say on our side, you can always go to woxes.co, so it's woxes.co, to get the latest on events that we're planning to do, links to some of the Medium articles, information about who are the volunteers or ambassadors, or everything that's Woxes related would be on the website. For funding, for a list of events, not only from Woxes, but also external events, the newsletter is a great way to get to know what's happening in the city and around. And then specifically for me, I would say besides the website, besides the newsletter, if you want to get in touch with me, linkedin.com/Jordana Vazquez. And for, I would say social media handles, Woxes, well, W-O dash. Yes.
It's okay.
It's a difficult one. I get someone on this one all the time. But if you want to get in touch with me, I have Urban on site. That's really easy to get to, and it's open.
Awesome. Chante, do you want to share like an email or Instagram or anything by any chance? Or
no, I feel like folks can reach us via the million social media pages we have, and our email, and also our website. Our website has everything, so just go to our website and you can find our Medium, you can find our LinkedIn, Google group, newsletter, like all the things that you would need to understand how to get involved with us.
all of the things. Awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much. It was an honor. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. And I'm so excited that more and more people will learn about Woxes and the Women of Color Collective and sustainability. It's definitely going to grow. I see it growing, so I'm excited to see everything that you guys have in store. And again, thank you so much for starting this. It's incredibly valuable for women like myself and so many other women. So thank you so much, ladies, for being on the show today.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks so much for having us. This was fun. I feel like I needed this conversation. It was nice.
I can bring some joy to people's lives. That's all I need. All right, ladies.
All righty. Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah.